people like me. You need people like me so you can point your f***ing fingers and say, that's the bad guy.
The undisputed super featherweight champion of the world, Alycia Baumgardner.
That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
What was your main reason, main decision on signing with them?
My main decision was being respected, being valued, having a voice. I'm not just a fighter under a roster. I'm a pioneer for the sport of boxing. And they saw my vision, and I love that, and they got to hear me out. And this is the biggest turning point of my career. You're going to see amazing fights. You're going to see the most of Alycia, the Baumgardner, and MVP is going to put that on the biggest stage.
In terms of Amanda, you mentioned, we will see. Is that the same for Clarissa, or is that when ship sailed already?
What's the question?
In terms of you and
Clarissa Shields?
Yeah.
I think Clarissa Shields is walking around like at 190 right now, right?
Totally out of the question.
Yeah.
And Alicia's walking around at 132, 133. So if Clarissa Shields wants the biggest payday of her life, she's going to have to figure out how to get to a weight class that makes sense for Alycia Baumgardner, right? That's just the reality of it. MVP puts on the biggest events for women in boxing, not what she does. So if she wants to have that opportunity against this champion, she's got to make the effort.
I agree with everything Alycia Bidarian said, even though I've never looked at this fight as being a realistic fight, because Alycia and Clarissa are separated by weight, and it's a lot. Even by women's standards, it's a lot. We all know that the women fluctuate in weight a lot more than the men do, but between Alycia and Clarissa, Alicia's still down there at 130, whereas Clarissa is up there at heavyweight or light heavyweight. It would take some time for her to get down to a reasonable enough weight where this contest would make sense, and I don't think she can. I think the lowest Clarissa can go is 154, and I'm not even sure that she can make that, because she hasn't made it in years. And even if she could get to 154, what incentive is she providing for Alycia to meet her there when Alycia would be the MVP fighter? She's the one bringing the money. She's the one bringing the platform to the table. What makes a fight happen? A lot of people aren't going to like to hear this, but now that Alycia is with MVP, in all likelihood, she's going to be making more money than Clarissa. What do you think Dimitri Salita is paying that woman? And how do you think he's paying her? The most money that Clarissa Shields ever made in her entire boxing career was during her brief stint on Boxer, when they signed her with the intention of making the Marshall fight. And they made that fight. That has come and gone. That was over 2 years ago. Since then, the fights have been comparatively smaller, as well as the audience. She's going to start carrying on about her 2 gold medals and all the alphabet titles she won and all of those empty divisions, which means Bo Diddley as far as the money. She's not the one bringing the money, and in a situation like this, I'm not even sure she'd be bringing a belt for them to fight for. A belt for Alycia to win. So what's the incentive to do it? So it's just like Alycia Bidarian said, if that's a fight that Clarissa wants, it's up to her to get to a weight that makes sense for Alycia, because she's bringing the money, she's bringing the platform. So who does Alycia fight, though? Well, look, she's still undisputed champion in the super featherweight division, so she can always make 1 or 2 more defenses of her undisputed crown. But beyond that, she could always move up to 135, and she could always fight one of the champions that are there. Stephanie Han almost immediately comes to mind. Stephanie Han, that's not with Boxer, she's not with Matchroom, she's WBA champion, but it's not political like it is with the other girls that are there. And I happen to think MVP is more than capable of making Stephanie an offer she can't refuse. The kind of money she's never seen as a pugilist. She's set to defend her WBA title for the very first time in a matter of weeks, where Alycia Baumgardner is set to defend her undisputed crown in July. If she wins, and I think she's going to, she can always move up and she can always fight Stephanie. The inconvenient truth about these weight classes is what I've been telling you all along. Clarissa doesn't have as many options on the table as Alycia because the real depth in women's boxing is at the lower weights. The higher you go, the thinner the talent pool becomes. And the smaller the audience. So when Nikisa Bidarian says that if Clarissa wants the biggest payday of her life, then she'll have to get to a weight that makes sense for Alycia, that's 100% accurate. Whether you like it or not, whether Clarissa likes it or not. But she can stay up there. She can reign over as many empty divisions as she wants to. Call herself the GOAT for it. Whatever makes her feel real. But as far as the money and the power, Alicia's got that. It's reality. You don't have to like it. In men's light heavyweight news, Callum Smith is willing to risk mandatory challenger position for an Anfield Stadium fight in his native Liverpool. Remotivated, reinvigorated, and reappearing, the key to the second coming of Callum Mundo Smith, 31-2 with 22 knockouts, was always going to be reliant on something that the Liverpudlian had struggled with of late: activity. Yet fresh off an enthralling victory over Joshua Buatsi back in February, the former WBA super middleweight champion's quest for light heavyweight glory is set to continue. The 34-year-old has revealed that he will not sit waiting for a title shot and is willing to risk his position if a clash at Anfield Stadium were offered. After dominating at British level, the former Team GB member entered the World Boxing Super Series in 2017 and overcame Eric Skokeland and Nikkei Hulskin before a career-best win in the final saw Smith halt George Groves to become the WBA super middleweight champion in 2018. However, after two defenses of the marble, Smith was trumped by pound-for-pound sensation Canelo Alvarez in late 2020 in a unification clash with the WBC champion suffering a career-first defeat. Following that shortcoming, Smith moved up to light heavyweight and scored 2 early knockout wins. He had fought just 6 rounds in over 3 years ahead of a showdown with unified champion Artur Beterbiev last January, accenting Callum Smith's sparse schedule of activity over the years. And rumor has it, the reason that this guy wasn't more active in the past is because he drives a hard bargain. He wants a lot of money whenever he gets out there. And that's what's not written in the article. Like all victims bar Dmitry Bivol, Smith was dispatched by Artur Beterbiev inside of the distance in a first career knockout loss. Callum refused to give up on his goal of becoming a 2-weight world champion and returned with a stoppage of his own against Carlos Galvan in November. Upon his return to the big stage, Smith was tasked with British rival Joshua Buatsi last month, and the pair went toe-to-toe in a Fight of the Year candidate. It was the Scouser who came out on top, claiming the WBO interim light heavyweight title as a reward for his efforts. Now mandatory for Bivol, who just vacated the WBC title, Smith finds himself right in the mix for world honors at light heavyweight. His current position is expected to see him fight for a belt soon, either against Bivol or in a scrap for a possibly vacant WBO title. Recently on Sky Sports, Callum revealed that he would be willing to risk that WBO interim title and subsequent mandatory challenger position to pursue a showdown at Anfield Stadium, home of his beloved Liverpool Football Club. That opportunity would need to be against either WBC interim champion and mandatory challenger David Benavidez or Anthony Yarde, should the latter defeat Lyndon Arthur in what is their trilogy. Anthony Yarde faces Lyndon Arthur on the blockbuster Eubank vs. Benville at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium on April 26. The winner is expected to be thrust into further fringe world-level contests against domestic rivals such as Smith, Buatsi, or Willie Hutchinson. Eddie Hearn recently chimed in on the potentiality of one or some of those fights: Smith versus Benavidez, Smith versus Yarde.
We're discussing that fight with Louis. No firm offers made, but I don't see. Tell me another fight that Benavidez could make. That light heavyweight division is actually quite thin at the top in terms of big names. And you know, I think Callum's got great options ahead. He's going to be mandatory to Dmitry Bivol. You've got the potential Yarde fight on a 5v5. You've got the Benavidez fight. You know, it's really interesting. And I think David Benavidez against Callum Smith's a hell of a fight.
You hear Callum Smith say that he wants to fight in Anfield in Liverpool, and then you look over at David, and David is still making the assertion he wants to fight in Vegas. He's a Vegas fighter now, and that's when it comes to a Dimitri Bivol fight. So I imagine he would take the exact same stance when it comes to Callum. So the question then becomes, is the PBC going to put up enough money to bring Callum to America, more specifically to Las Vegas? Because Callum has a reputation for driving a hard bargain. He's not going to fight on the cheap. He's not going to fight you for what you just paid David Morrell. Especially not after Turki Al Sheikh already made a play to do that fight, offering David Benavidez millions. And I'm sure Callum would have got a nice size purse too.
Well, hopefully, we might be looking at a future opponent. Callum Smith. We're both at 175. He just gave a great fight, and I think me and Callum Smith would be a great fight. So maybe we can make that happen in the future.
We received a large amount of millions to fight Smith, and we denied.
Did you catch that? Samson admitted they were made a multi-million-dollar offer to fight Callum Smith, which they rejected. Let's hear it again. DJ, play it back.
A large amount of millions. To fight Smith, and we denied.
So what immediately stands out to me is that if David Benavidez's offering to Callum Smith is less than he stood to make boxing in Saudi, then he may not bite. He may not take it. And that's why I've been saying that Team Benavidez should have just took the fight in Saudi for what Turkey was willing to pay. Because believe it or not, Callum Smith actually has one or two more options than David Benavidez does. He has the winner of Yarde versus Arthur 3. He's got Willie Hutchinson. Who does David have if Callum doesn't take this fight? Who does David fight on pay-per-view, since they insist on billing his fights as pay-per-views exclusively? Andy Purawall recently caught up with Tom Brown, who lended some insights as to David Benavidez's immediate schedule.
In terms of some potential fights on the horizon, I just wanted to get your thoughts on David Benavidez. He's been a man hunting those big fights. He wanted Canelo for years. He wanted the winner of Bivol Better BF2. Instead now, Bivol vacated that WBC title. Benavidez has been elevated to full champion. We're going to get a trilogy there. How frustrating has it been that, for whatever reason, David's just not been able to get those big names that he's desired?
Well, I'm sure it's been frustrating for him, but he and his promoter Samson Lukowitz have they keep grinding, and you could see Benavidez again in his next fight defending that title. He's open to going up to cruiserweight and challenging for a title there, and so look at. He's had a tremendous career, and obviously the Canelo fight never came to fruition. David took it in stride and went up to 75 and won another title. So, he'll be fine.
Eddie pointed out to me yesterday, at the world scene at 175, it's quite thin on the ground in terms of top-level names. You got, as you say, David, and Better BF and Bivol, but we know that there's been talk about a potential Callum Smith fight. Talk to me about that from your perspective, Tom. Do you feel like we could see Benavidez Smith take place?
I think we could see anyone right now in the rankings, and like I said, he's open to moving up to cruiserweight. So we'll be sorting that out in the next few weeks. He's got a baby due. I think it's in the late summer, fall, and he'll be looking to fight before the end of the year.
Be surprised if he does. And did you catch that? Did you catch that every time Andy mentioned the potentiality of the Callum Smith fight, Tom Brown didn't give a clear answer. What he did mention was David moving up to cruiser. Andy mentioned Callum 2 times, and Tom mentioned moving up to cruiser 2 times. Gee, I wonder why. It's almost like that's been the plan all along. And it's almost like I've been telling you that's the plan all along for weeks, for months, because for all this hullabaloo about acquiring a vacant title, David may end up leaving this division before he even defends it. Why? No opponents. He may not be able to secure the opponents. Do you think that Callum Smith, Anthony Yarde, or Joshua Buatsi, those guys over there across the pond, do you think they're going to fight you for what David Morrell fought you for? For what Demetrius Andrade fought you for? One or some of those guys have already had a taste of that Saudi money. And even before that, they were already making good money in the UK domestic boxing scene that yields more for a light heavyweight today than the American boxing scene. America doesn't have much of a stake at 175 pounds, whereas those Brits, they can fight each other and make a lot of money. One of the biggest fights at the weight, one of the biggest money fights, still is Buatsi versus Yarde. And that's without an alphabet title. Now you have Callum Smith versus Yarde. It's another fight that could make either fighter a lot of money without either of them conceding home field advantage, because that's what they would have to do with David. And David would have to put together a generous enough offering to get them over here. Do you think he can? We let you in on a little secret. David Benavidez versus Anthony Yarde, or David Benavidez versus Callum Smith, are all solid fights for David, and great fights for the hardcores, but with the casuals, those fights don't move the needle. We let you in on a little secret. As a regular fight, as part of a regular schedule, any one of those fights would be solid, but as a pay-per-view in America, at an $80 price point, we let you in on a little secret. Between what it would cost them to get one of those Brits to come over here, in tandem with the overall marquee value of the show, it's risky. It's very risky, because Americans are not buying pay-per-views anywhere near as much as they used to, and I don't think they're falling over themselves with adulation for either Anthony Yarde or Callum Smith. Do you understand? Do I need to make it more simple for you? Let me make it more simple for you. For David Benavidez, even as WBC champion, it's trouble. Those fights might be more trouble than they're worth. So much trouble that he don't even stay at 175. He goes to cruiser to fight Zurdo because that's what he was always going to do. All Zurdo has to do is hold up his end of the bargain over the summer months, beat the Cuban, beat his mandatory challenger, Uniel Dorticos, then they will proceed with a fight amongst themselves in America. It's the funniest thing. Tom Brown let it slip that David Benavidez won't be fighting at any point in the summer months, that if he comes back, it'll be in either the fall or the winter, which begs the question, then why were you guys hurrying Dmitry Bivol to fight you if you weren't going to be available? Because they weren't actually hurrying Dmitry to fight them, they just wanted a vacant title. They just wanted it for the optics. They may not even defend it. Because who are you going to defend it against? I'm telling you, those Brits are not going to fight you for what you paid David Morrell. You can do that to an 11-0 Cuban that don't speak no English. You can pay him peanuts, but you can't do that with them. You let it slip that David Benavidez will not be back at any point over the summer months, and that if he does come back, it'll be in the fall or winter. Me being honest, I'd be surprised if he fights again this year, and if he does, I'm not sure it's gonna be Callum. Could be Zurdo. They figure it's an easier fight to sell. A fighter of Mexican descent versus a Mexican national in America. They don't want to go international. They want to stay local. And a Mexican American versus a Mexican national in America moves the needle, moves it more at least than one of them versus a Brit. A Brit that drives a hard bargain. They're not going to fight you on the cheap. They're not going to concede home field advantage without being compensated for it. So with those things in mind, I don't really expect to see Benavidez versus Smith. I ain't holding my breath. I think the plan was always to fight Zurdo, and that's still the plan.